Welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle podcast with your host, Emmett Muckles. Please visit iTunes, Stitcher, or emmettmuckles.com to listen to all the episodes for free.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle podcast. This is your host, Emmett Muckles. Happy on a bright and gloomy sunny Saturday morning with my guest today, Stephen Horne. I've been waiting so long to talk to this gentleman for the sheer fact that I just wanted to gain a better understanding about my own self. And I think this gentleman is the person to help me.
Well, thank you, Emma. It's really good to be talking to you. Yes, we finally got together.
Yes, this is true. So you can see I'm in my man cave here. I got all kinds of stuff, yoga balls over here and guitars and stuff. But this is my escape route for my children who are just running amok upstairs. So you do so many things. I've listened to some of your lectures. Your faith is a big part of who you are.
Yes, it is.
And I grew up in I went to Baptist church, but went to Catholic schools.
Oh, that's a really interesting contrast.
Yeah. So I was a musician in the Baptist church, and I went to Catholic schools, and it was a slight diaspora of slight departure of things, but it was a really great experience. But let's talk about you. What is it all that you encompass? Because there are so many things. You have books, you have videos, you have blogs, and you're herbalist, right?
Yeah, I'm an herbalist. But I think overall, what I'm really interested in is what works. I mean, when I'm very interested in just learning anything that enables you to get consistent results in life. Like, so when it comes to health, I'm interested in what really works with health. When it comes to, maintaining a good mental and emotional attitude, I'm interested in what works there. I'm very interested in what makes that good marriage, how you raise kids, how you make money, everything. I'm a very curious person. What you might call a lifelong learner.
So you're like Tim Ferriss in respects, and like myself, that you're constantly looking for the shiny, happy things in life that make life better.
Yes, I am. And I figure whenever I encounter a problem, that all I need to do is get the right understanding, and I can tackle that problem and it'll work. And part of that is believing in being able to go out and study and read and everything, but part of it is faith. I mean, I believe with God's help, any obstacle that comes my way can be overcome. Because I don't think God puts an obstacle in my way unless there's a lesson in it for me to learn, something for me to gain from that.
Yeah.
And what really clinched this whole thing, if you kind of want to understand, there's three things I'd say. One is the fact that I surrendered my life to God when I was like 21 and said, whatever you want me to do, I'll do. So when I surrendered my life to God, as I was explaining earlier, I started to hear the still small voice of the Spirit, and I started to learn to listen to that inner voice. And it guide me, and I had amazing experiences with that, and that it's really that little voice that has moved me into so many different things, And one of the things that really changed me was in my last semester of college, I took an experimental class in learning and teaching that was absolutely phenomenal, that just blew my mind. And at the same time, I took a class in parenting. And my youngest daughter was 10 at the time, and I read this book called Children in the Challenge by Rudolf Dreikurs and learned some things about kids, and it made parenting delightful. I've always enjoyed being a parent. Right now, I've got some stepsons, and they're not used to being disciplined, and so and I consider it a fun challenge. And what that did is it taught me this idea that once you understand the principles of something, it becomes fun and interesting and challenging. Life becomes this exciting, interesting challenge right? And so everything that comes my way where there's a problem or obstacle, I'm looking for the solutions. I'm looking for how to do that. And then when I find solutions, I'm so like, oh, this is cool. And then I want to share it with people, right?
So how did you get to herbalism? I mean,
well, that actually was started when I was 15, and I was studying edible and medicinal wild plants in Scouts as part of like learning outdoor survival. And I eaten stinging nettle, cooked it and eaten stinging nettle.
Say it slower.
Stinging nettle.
Stinging nettle, correct?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. It's a plant that when you brush up against it, it gives you like a rash. It's irritating to the skin.
Wait, but you said you were eating it, right?
Yeah, if you cook it, it takes the sting out, and it's like eating spinach or chard or beet greens or any kind of green vegetable. So I was sitting on this hillside thinking, wow, that's cool. And that the little voice inside said, well, if you were a loving God, wouldn't you have put everything naturally upon the earth to take care of your children?
Yeah.
And I kind of got fascinated with medicinal plants, but I had a lot of health problems. I had chronic sinus problems. I was never that physically strong. I was always going to the doctor, getting penicillin, blah, blah, blah. And when I was in my early 20s, I looked at this and I said, well, wait a minute. Maybe, I need to like try to use these herbs. I was thinking of emergency preparedness, outdoor survival, that sort of thing. I thought, well, maybe God made the medicine better in the first place. So I started changing my diet. I went to a chiropractor. I started using herbs, and I started to get better. And I pretty soon I just found out that it worked better for me.
So how did you move forward in understanding other herbs and how they relate to the body and Chinese medicine and old practices? Because I know there are a lot of things that my mom and my grandma would say, and they would clear things up, but you don't hear about those items anymore. And even I thought about this morning. So about an hour before our conversation, I thought about Bayer Corporation. And I remember I went on a tour and how they started off with natural remedies and just trying to refine those, but big pharma's turned into something else. How can we get back to that basics of living?
Well, this is the thing. There are lots and lots of medicinal plants, thousands and thousands of them. And they're all over the place. When I take people like on an herb walk, even here where I live, I can take within an hour and show people 30 or 40 edible and medicinal wild plants. And just a short walk from my home. And they're everywhere. It's just people have lost the knowledge of how to use this stuff.
Yeah, I believe that.
And like you said, aspirin comes from salicylic acid, which is found in a number of plants. And basically they created they extracted that and added something to it to buffer it, and that was aspirin. Okay? Mm-hmm. That's how Bayer got started. That's how a lot of drugs got started. They got started isolating chemicals out of plants. And so one of the things that I began to think was, well, maybe God made the medicine better in the first place. and man's tampering with it. And this is what I found is drugs will work very fast, but they also will have a lot more side effects and a lot more problems. Whereas the herb contains thousands of chemical compounds that buffer each other, help support each other, whatever. And so it has a gentler action. It doesn't give you the wham bam instant relief, but it actually helps your body come back to normal.
Yeah.
So I tell people all the time, how many people do you know have cured themselves of high blood pressure by taking high blood pressure medication?
I'm not one of them, and that's one of the reasons I was like, maybe he can help me out,
Yeah, well, and that's because they're not designed to cure. Okay, ever since we put in, these FDA regulations that costs millions and millions of dollars to prove a drug, there's no economic incentive to do anything that is cheap or natural. And there is economic incentive to work on things where you can give something that will manage the symptoms of a disease, and people will have to take it for the rest of their life. And so all of the possibilities of things that could actually help permanently bring your blood pressure down never get researched or explored. Just a second. I've just had a little bit of a cough, been taking some garlic to get over it. Anyway, so
I bet you that's nice to sleep next to you, though, with the garlic.
Well, it has a side effect of increasing something else.
Kudos to you, my brother.
All right. So anyway, like for example, one of the most common reasons why people have high blood pressure is most people are deficient in magnesium.
What?
Yeah, it's that simple. See, your arteries have muscles in them.
Yes.
And calcium makes muscles contract, and magnesium helps muscles relax. So when you don't have enough magnesium, your arteries can contract, which increases blood pressure, but they have a hard time relaxing, which lowers blood pressure.
Oh, I'm on it. I take magnesium like twice a week.
Yeah. Well, most people need like maybe 400 milligrams a day.
Really?
Because they're not getting enough in their diet.
So now that you're saying that, you make me think that that's one of the things that I've gone through, with like the Gershon diet and looking at eating whole plant foods. I tried that, and I got really sick.
Well, yeah. What happened?
My tongue felt like it was burnt.
Okay.
My gums were bleeding, but I think in retrospect, I think it was more or less if I wasn't getting enough food, because you have to eat more, and I lift weights too. So I have to eat more more substance than I normally would, than just having a bowl like I would the same size of steak or something like that.
Well, the best, I've looked at the whole dietary thing for 30 years because I've been studying this stuff since the early 80s, right? 40 years almost now, 35 years, okay? So I've read about everything, every dietary philosophy, nutritional philosophy there is out there. And human beings can survive on a wide range of diets, okay? But the issue is nutritional density. Not all diets are optimal, and getting the right nutrients is critical. So the thing that I think is the most useful information on nutrition comes from Dr. Weston Price, and the Weston A. Price Foundation.
I'm trying to find my pencil.
Yeah. Well, you want to write this down because Dr. Price was a prominent dentist. He was the head of the what is now the American Dental Association, and he wrote the textbooks that were the standard for dental schools at that time. But in his years of being a dentist, he had noticed a decline in the dental health of his patients.
Yeah,
and he'd also noted a decline in general health in his patients. So he hypothesized, that this had something to do with the changes in diet. So during the 1930s, prior to World War II, he went to 6 of the 7 continents of the world, studying indigenous people and comparing them with people who were living on modern Western diets in the same location of the world. And everywhere he went, he found the same thing. The people on indigenous diets had almost no tooth decay, no impacted wisdom teeth, really healthy bones. They didn't get arthritis when they got older. They had almost no crime. They were very mentally healthy, happy, and they almost never got sick. And the women had no trouble giving in childbirth. So these patterns observing all over the world, what he did is he took samples of the food they were eating and sent it back to the United States for nutritional analysis. Now, this was prior to the discovery of some of the trace nutrients. But in terms of macronutrients like calcium, magnesium, macrominerals, indigenous peoples had four times more minerals than Western counterparts.
Wow.
Eating refined foods. They had 4 times more water-soluble vitamins like vitamin C and B complex, but they had 10 times more fat-soluble vitamins. 10 times. And that things you're talking about with your tongue and the bleeding, that's not that you're not getting enough fat-soluble vitamins. And fat-soluble vitamins primarily come from animal foods.
Yeah, someone said that to me. They said maybe your blood type is dependent on eating certain amounts of animal protein.
Yeah. Well, he found that the healthiest people in the world ate regularly from either dairy products from pasture-raised animals, wild game or pasture-raised meat, but they ate the organ meats. They didn't just eat the red meat; they ate the organs, or eating seafoods.
Really?
Fresh food from the sea, and when the people who ate regularly from those food groups had the healthiest bones, healthiest teeth, and so forth. But all those foods are extremely rich in vitamins, and especially fat-soluble vitamins and good fats.
So what about? Excuse me. Now I got it. What about the plant-based tribes of the world? How did they fare versus the ones who were?
Well, he didn't look at any indigenous peoples. That all the indigenous cultures he studied, about 30 to 40% of their diet was animal protein.
Wow, and that's counterintuitive to what they're saying today, which is you should go to. But it's a widespread that they're doing, and what? But
remember,
go ahead.
Remember, these animals aren't raised in commercial feedlots. And in little teeny pens and cages. These are wild animals, pasture-raised animals, ocean fish, that kind of thing. So it's the quality of the protein and the quality of the fat that makes a difference. There's a huge difference in the fat profile and the vitamin profile and the everything between an egg from a chicken that scratches around in the yard and an egg from a chicken that's in a little teeny pen about this big.
Yeah.
Four of them getting fed some commercial feed loaded with chemicals and hormones and antibiotics.
Yeah.
Right?
So basically you're saying, if we have a choice or if we have the means to do so, then going for grass-fed or pasture-fed foods such as grass-fed beef and what we consider organically raised chickens and goats and things are better for you versus the commercialized produce that we get today.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the big keys. I mean, and then besides that, the other thing that people need to eat is lots of vegetables, and not like potatoes, and not potatoes and ketchup.
I'm gonna tell you why I'm laughing so hard is because my wife is Austrian, so everything contains a potato.
No, I'm talking about things like peas and green beans and green leafy vegetables and broccoli and cauliflower and carrots and parsnips, turnips, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Most people don't. The average person goes to the grocery store and they maybe buy 3 or 4 vegetables, maybe carrots, onions, potatoes, right, lettuce. But I love to play stump the cashier.
I do that too. That's a good one. That's the one.
I buy the vegetables or fruits that they go, what is this?
Yeah. What is that? That's a parsnip. Who?
Yes.
What's the biggest one that gets people is beets, because I'm a freak for beets. And
I love beets too.
And they look at me like,
well, my wife is Ukrainian, so you can. Actually, it's my fiance, but we're living together. We're getting married officially next month. But anyway, I think of her as my wife. But she's Ukrainian, so of course they love beets. Borscht, food for the soul.
That's really funny. I thought I was the only one that goes through like explaining what each item is, so they can look it up and then type it in, and then they look at me like, you buy a lot of vegetables. I'm like, most people don't. She's like, 9 times out of 10, no.
Yeah, and if you really want to help, like just as some simple things, butter, grass-fed butter.
Oh, it's so
really,
awesome.
really good for you.
It's
really good for you.
It's really awesome. And let me ask you, where do people start? So if you're just ignorant, let's say, I'll act like I'm one of my cousins. And I'm from I'm from Detroit, Michigan. I come from auto workers and very blue collar people who put flour on everything and then dump it in very hot grease for about 5 to 15 minutes. And then they're going to have a starch with that. And then they're going to have about a fistful of vegetables, which is just to make the plate a little greener.
Right.
So where does that person start?
Well, actually, for most people, the biggest thing you can start by is eliminating refined carbohydrates.
And define refined carbohydrates for those who don't know.
White sugar, high fructose corn syrup, and white flour. Those three. Now that sounds.
All the things I just told you about, you said get rid of them.
Yeah. Those three things are so prevalent. I mean, if you think about trying to avoid them, just go to the store and try to avoid them. Look at labels. But sugar in particular is highly addictive.
Yeah.
And it's one of the worst things for your health that you can eat. So you can't just deprive yourself of sweets. So you got to get some honey, you got to get some freeze-dried sugarcane juice, you got to get some fresh fruit, you got to get some things that are sweet but have nutritional value. Because here's the reason why this is problematic. In order for you to be able to convert the energy, the starches and sugars into energy, you have to have chromium, zinc, magnesium, vanadium. You have to have B-complex vitamins, vitamin C, and a whole host of other nutrients that are necessary for the mitochondria to make that into usable energy.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have that. Refined sugar doesn't contain any of those things. So where do you get them? Well, the body takes them from your bones, it takes them from your teeth, it takes them from your brain, it takes them from all the other organs and systems of your body to try to convert those carbohydrates into energy. And it can't. And so you're still hungry. So you want more. Plus, sugar triggers the same dopamine response in our brain that caffeine does, that alcohol does, that all addictive substances do.
Addictive substances.
Yeah. So, but when you're eating a natural carbohydrate that has natural sugars in it, your body gets what it needs, and the reward circuitry goes, good. But when you don't, you have a letdown, and that's what happens with all addictions. You feel good, when you initially do the addiction, eat it, but then afterwards there's a letdown, and so then you go, I need more. Meanwhile, it takes niacin to process sugar, and it also takes niacin to make serotonin. So your body will get a release of serotonin to get the niacin from it to use the sugars. So it makes you feel good, but then your serotonin levels drop. And so it's just like any addiction. You go up and then you go down.
Yeah, that's the sugar crash. And that's probably the crash. We used to call it the itis. So after like my grandma or my mom would cook, like they'd fry something and it would be meat, and then you'd have this huge starch and you might have something green on your plate, but you're immediately after you finish that meal going to take a nap.
Yeah. So you go up and you go down. You go up and crash. And then eventually what happens is the high insulin from that creates inflammation in your system, throws your hormones out of balance, and basically leads to gaining weight, having arthritis, heart disease, cancer cells feed on sugar. Almost all of our major degenerative diseases are coming from eating refined carbohydrates and processed vegetable oils. Those two things. Eliminate those two things.
Wait, you said processed vegetable oil?
Yeah, they're the equivalent for fats as to refined sugar.
So we just need to get some grass-fed butter and cook with that instead.
Yeah, and coconut oil and,
What about macadamia? Is it macadamia nut oil? Is that the one?
Oh, that's actually the one I use when I want to use the oil for frying something in the frying pan, like an egg or whatever.
Yeah, because they say it has a high temperature.
That. Yeah, but you want to not use too many of those kind of fats. What you want is butter, nuts, avocados, grass-fed red meat, eggs.
I love eggs. I love eggs.
Raw milk, cheese. I love eggs too. I also love raw milk cheese. Cheese made from raw milk. Love that, especially grass-fed.
Yeah.
But the point is, you need fats. But what you want is it's the same thing. You want carbohydrates that have nutrients in them. You want fats that have nutrients in them.
Gotcha.
Whereas when you take a refined vegetable oil, even some of the better ones like safflower and avocado oil, you're still heating it up, stripping it of its vitamin content, and stripping it of its mineral content so it lasts longer. And so you wind up with the equivalent in oil of refined sugar, and those are the two big things. We need good fats and we need good carbohydrates.
So basically, you're saying when we go to the grocery store, stay away from the middle of the grocery store. Just travel on the outside, because typically in a grocery store, your produce section is on the outside, your dairy section is on the outside. That's pretty much it. And your meat section is on the outside.
Absolutely.
But it's really hard to find grass-fed in most commercial grocery stores.
Yes, it is. So find the best quality food you can.
I got you.
The best quality food you can. But go to the produce section first.
Yeah, that's
and look for things that are colorful and smell them and look at them. Things that appeal to your senses.
So if you saw it in nature, you'd say, "Oh, that's pretty. I'd eat that."
Yeah, exactly. And then get some cookbooks that teach you how to cook vegetables.
Yeah, well, that's not surprising, because I've found out many people don't know how to cook a basic meal, particularly if they're under 35.
They don't. They have no idea how to cook anything. I mean, I've seen lots of people in America who have no concept of how to cook even some of the most simple things. It's crazy to me, because I love to cook. I tell people I like to play with my food. I like to grow food. I like to bottle food. I like to cook food, and I like to eat it.
Do you can your food too?
Yeah, I can food. I love to can. I love to make my own salsa and my own jam and bottle peaches and pears and.
So you just should have a picnic and invite the whole nation over, charge like $10 a head, and we'll just learn from you.
Well, it's so funny, because I actually love to feed people, and what I think is fun is to make things like pizza or lasagna or something like that and make it a lot healthier. And then people will always say, "Oh, this is so good," except for my stepsons. They don't want to eat any of it.
That's because they've seen you make it. They're like, "That's all natural stuff. Why would we eat that?"
It's so funny. My daughter had this recipe for a chocolate zucchini cake.
Ooh.
And I make it with freeze dried sugar cane, sucanat, whole grain flour, grated zucchini, all these good ingredients, and these boys would eat it. "Oh, this is so good." And then one of them the other day said, "There's zucchini. How could you feed that to my son?" I go, "Well, you liked it when you ate it, didn't you?" It's so funny. It's all psychological. But their mom tells me that when they were in the Ukraine, these kids would eat that stuff. That this is one of the cultural problems we're facing. They came over here. They were kind of poor. They went to the food bank.
Mm-hmm.
Food bank. They have all kinds of pastries and chips and all of this processed food and everything. And the kids started eating that, and then they didn't want to eat anything else.
It's addictive.
and it's designed to be deliberately to be addictive. The major food companies get focus groups of overweight people.
They must come to where I live.
and then they try to figure out how to get them to eat more of their product.
Oh, wow.
So they figure out what ingredients they can put in it that will make them want to eat. You know how the Lay's potato chips, bet you can't eat just one?
Yeah.
That's what they want. They want you not to eat a few chips with your sandwich. They want you to start eating the chips and keep eating them until you finish the whole bag.
That's like Soylent Green.
Yeah. It's really a major problem. And here's one of the other things that's crazy, and we're talking about from a social political thing. Why is it that we subsidize chemical agriculture and genetically modified crops and all that stuff from the government, and then we force people who are growing organic food to pay the government to get certified to sell it?
Because their lobby, the first mention has a bigger lobby than
exactly. And so if in reality it should be cheaper to buy locally grown fresh produce rather than all this commercially grown food that takes all these chemicals and petroleum and everything to produce. If the government didn't subsidize it, healthy food would be cheaper.
Yeah, that's true. Because you don't see as many gardens as you used to. I remember when I was a kid, every third house had a garden in the backyard. Now
Right.
You don't see it that much. And this was in the inner city of Detroit,
Yeah.
back in the 70s and 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Yeah. I mean, and I love to garden. I live on an acre, and I love to garden. Especially, there's nothing better than a tomato. You go out and wait till it's vine ripe, and you pick it off the vine. I mean, you can't get that at the grocery store.
You know what? You just made a really good point that I just pulled out of what you were saying. You said you pull it off the vine, and this is one thing that most people don't realize is that it's warm. It's room temperature because we're so used to refrigeration and preserving things. We buy stuff, and I'm guilty of this too. I'll go and buy meat, and I'll parse it out, and I'll throw it in my freezer, and it'll sit there for months until, and then I have to rotate it. But that's the normal. We don't know how to eat in the now. We don't know how to sense in the now. And I think that's all a part of that marketing scheme. But you've written some books. So what are the books that people can pick up and begin their journey to a healthier, more organic eating style?
Well, in my opinion, the best book on nutrition that also happens to be a cookbook is Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon. She's the president of the Weston A. Price Foundation, and she talks all about all of these issues about, traditional diets and how traditional people ate and so forth. And she talks about how to make cultured foods, because the more cooked food that people ate, the more cultured foods they would eat. We're talking about things like sauerkraut and yogurt and kefir and pickled vegetables, naturally pickled vegetables, stuff like that. And she tells how to make broth. Bone broth is a tremendously healthy food.
So good. Yeah,
it is.
It's so, to put myself through school, or when I was in high school, this is before you needed a work permit. I worked in a kitchen. I worked for a major hotel chain. And there was this big industrial kitchen, and there was just one day we had all these parts that we just threw in this kettle that I could literally sit in. And we just boiled it for like 20 hours. And I asked the chef what we were doing, because I was still in high school. He's like, I'm making stock, or basically broth. And he had all the leftover things we had chopped off the vegetables, like the ends. We had all the bones, all the leftovers from the prime rib, thrown in this pot and boiled to no end, strained it off, and then strained the grease off of it, and then just had the broth. And we used that for the base of most of our meals that we cooked in the kitchen.
Yeah. And when you make a soup with natural stock like that, it has this wonderful mouthfeel. It feels, when the stock gelatinizes, if you put it in the fridge, it gets that mouthfeel that makes it feel like it's not just watery, right? It's like a substance. I love it. And this is the thing. To me, when you get used to eating natural food, all the junk food, you look at it and go, ugh. It loses its appeal. And part of it is, when I gave up refined sugar, which was one of the hardest things I ever did, that's when I learned sugar was addictive, and I started to have empathy for people who were trying to give up smoking or drinking. It was so hard for the first 2 or 3 weeks. But anyway, once I got past that, like I think second or third week, it was like this fog lifted from my brain, and I could think clearly. And I felt so good. And I thought, I didn't know you could feel this good, because I'd never in my life gone without eating sugar. But after 2 or 3 weeks of not eating sugar, there was something that came on inside of me, and I felt so much better, and I could think so much clearer that I decided I needed to continue to that lifestyle. Occasionally I slip back, because everybody around you wants to have, whatever. And I wasn't even giving up all sweets. I was just giving up refined sugar and white flour. I was still using honey. I was still using some natural sweeteners. But it just felt so much better. If people knew, I raised my kids till we got divorced. We didn't have refined sugar in the house, and we didn't have white flour in the house. And my kids, even though they would get some of that from their friends or at school or whatever, they were so much calmer, and they were really smart. And every babysitter who ever watched them said they were the best behaved kids they'd ever took.
Yeah, that's because they're not bouncing off the walls and going crazy. So,
but I'd let them go trick or treating at Halloween, and they'd eat candy, and they'd all be bouncing off the walls, for the next day. And I'd think, if people understood how much easier it is to parent children if you don't feed them sugar, they probably would not do it, except the fact that they have to eat it themselves.
So what about dairy products? What's your take on dairy and the, how do I want to say this, and the proper dairy to use? Well,
again, there's a big difference in dairy that's pasture raised versus dairy that's feedlot raised, and there are issues with the pasteurization and homogenization of milk. I mean, like I said, Weston Price found that some of the healthiest people in the world ate raw milk and homemade cheese and, butter and all these dairy foods. But that's very different than what we're getting in the stores, where you've, even flash ultra pasteurization. They take perfectly good organic milk and then they ruin it by ultra pasteurizing.
They make it water.
Yeah. So I won't buy that stuff. The only dairy I'll buy, I don't particularly like milk. Milk doesn't agree with me, but I love cheese and I like yogurt, okay. Cultured dairy. And I like it with, I like raw milk cheese that's, made from raw milk. And so it's got live bacteria in it. And I also like the organic whole milk, grass-fed yogurt kind of thing. I like that too. Right. But some people can't tolerate it. Some people's digestive systems can't handle dairy very well. Some people can. It's something you just have to see if you can do it.
Yeah.
But raw milk, man, if you could get a hold of raw milk, it actually is a pretty healthy food, and if you tolerate it. Same thing. A lot of people can't tolerate grain.
Really?
They can't tolerate gluten.
Yeah. That's been a growing thing that I've seen
But I believe my personal feeling is that has been caused by the introduction of GMOs.
You say the introduction
modified organisms.
You say that's because of the introduction
of GMOs into our food supply on such a wide scale.
So
almost all non-organic corn is GMO.
And that's the other thing. I was trying to figure out something because to me, I break it down into two categories: modern GMO and classic GMO.
Well, it's not the same.
Yeah,
they act like it is, but it's not. Taking and crossbreeding plants and selecting for genetic qualities you like and so forth has been going on for thousands of years.
And that's classic GMO.
Yeah. The GMO, they take this this device and they splice together genes from bacteria and other organisms that aren't even natural to that plant, and they inject it into the nucleus of these plant cells. And the few cells that take, they then clone those and then go from there. It's totally unnatural. There's never been never been really any safety studies. I found this book called Genetic Roulette that went through all the studies that have been done on GMOs, and most of them were discontinued when they started to get bad results from the study.
Oh. Ew.
There's evidence that GMOs cause intestinal inflammation. They disrupt the friendly flora in your gut. They increase the incidence of leaky gut syndrome, and this is all independent of the fact that the glycophosphates themselves are carcinogens and damage your gut flora. And so when you think about it, the most prominent genetic modification is Roundup Ready. Roundup Ready. They found these bacteria that were highly resistant to the toxin Roundup, the glycophosphate.
Yeah.
So they got the gene that made them that, and they injected it into seeds so you can spray lots of herbicide, glycophosphate, and it doesn't kill the plant. But that means that the plants take up the glycophosphate, the toxin, into the plant, and then we eat it. Okay? So they can spray more and more glycophosphates on the soil, and more glycophosphates. But even the World Health Organization says that's carcinogen. So the number one genetic modification is so Monsanto can sell more Roundup.
Yeah, because I've been looking at Monsanto, and Monsanto is almost gotten a monopoly on certain markets because they sell you the seed, and they will find you or cause you some discomfort
if you save it.
If you save it. Yeah, if you save it, or if it cross-pollinates with a non-Monsanto flower or plant or organism, which is so bizarre in this modern climate of, with all these people and all the technology that we have in the world. You would think that we could elevate now to a higher level of consciousness overall versus being these modified comfort level people that we've gone into. But if you could give the audience a couple of tips, what would they be in their daily life?
Well, the first tip is going back to the same thing. I think that we put too much trust in the institutions of this world, in government, in blah, blah, thinking that that's going to solve our problems. And I found that it's reliance on God and reliance on myself that has solved my problems, not some entity outside of myself. Okay? If you really have faith and you really get down and humble yourself and you go out there and study, God can guide you to the answers to your problems. And it's in you. We're all children of God, and we all have the capability of connecting directly to our Creator ourselves. We don't need a church. We don't need a religion. We don't need a priest. And we certainly don't need a big daddy government.
I like how you call them Big Daddy government.
Yeah.
So, but
as far as health goes, like I said, get rid of the refined carbohydrates, processed vegetable oils, and shop the produce section first. Mm-hmm. Learn how to cook fruits and vegetables. Don't be afraid of eggs. Don't be afraid of butter. Don't be afraid of red meat or chicken or any of that stuff. It's healthy for you. Just find the best quality you can find.
So it's best for people to find out how an animal naturally exists and what they consume, and go for those animals versus the processed animals.
Right. Absolutely. And there's, like you say, there's nothing to stop you from getting a little vegetable garden in your backyard if you've got any space at all.
Yeah, that would be less for me to mow, so that would be awesome.
Yeah. So but it's really just it seems hard at first, but one of the truths about life is, and I think it was Zig Ziglar who said this, that what seems like the hard way initially is the easy way in the end.
Yeah.
And what seems like the easy way in the short run is the hard way in the end. And so if you're willing to buckle down and get a little self-discipline and take the harder way that ends up easier,
in the long run,
then that's the way to go,
Yeah, I always relate it to beer because people always say, Emmett, you eat really healthy, because I make a lot of these stir fries. And people are like, how can you eat the same thing? Or how could you eat that? There's a stigma, particularly in my community, that is like, why would you eat that? I've never seen that before. And I'm like, you just have to try it. Usually just hang out in the produce section and try to figure out how to make a meal out of something, that's organic. And people are like, no, it won't taste that great. I was like, when you first had a beer, it didn't taste that great either. But now you drink like a case at a time. I'm like, it's the same thing. You will acclimate to most things if you just give it a try.
Yes, you will. You will. And which was making me think of something. I was going to say that, and then I forgot what it was. But anyway.
that happens.
That happens at times. Yeah, but it's definitely worth it. It's definitely worth it. I mean, you will feel so much. Oh, I know what I was going to say. You call this show the Billionaire Lifestyle.
Yes.
Well, I just heard Paul Pilsner speak, and he talked about how one of the big differences now between the wealthy and the poor is wealthy people eat healthier, they exercise more, they take better care of their bodies and health than most of the common people do. And one of the gurus I have studied in marketing says, if you go into a lot of more affluent people's homes, you'll see they have libraries. They read books.
Yes.
You go into all poor people's homes and they have a big screen TV. If you want to improve yourself in life, take care of yourself. Start by taking care of yourself. Feed your body, but also feed your mind.
Yeah.
Read some books. Go out and educate and get more knowledge about life and how things work. And once you do that and you apply them, what you sow, you reap. That is a universal law. It works all the time. So if you're not reaping what you want, you're not sowing the right crop.
Yeah.
Find out the crop to sow that will reap you the result you want in life.
Yeah, I want to divulge from the food because I listened to one of your lectures that you had. It was a webinar that you had, and it was referring to. I just heard it now. I'm having a mind scare, and I think you were talking about the lineage in the Bible and Revelations. I believe it was. I can't remember it. Doggone it! You were watching some of my prophecy and preparedness webinars that I did. Yes. And how it related to, today's thing. I didn't get through it because I was listening to it while I was doing a job, and then everybody needed my attention. But I found it very interesting how you began to break some things down and, kind of relate people that you can't always it's taken verbatim, but you have to think about the time in which it was written as well, because you can't always use your modern context to understand biblical text.
Well, if you're talking about, referring like to the book of Revelation, where I talk about the mark of the beast, which a lot of people talk about.
Yeah.
First of all, spiritually, what I've understood, we're living in that already. Okay, there is this thing of the banking cartels and these international business people who basically bribe politicians and subdue countries that won't go along with them and all that sort of thing. And it starts off talking about Babylon the Great, Mystery Babylon.
Yeah.
And she sits on many waters and she's committed fornication with the kings of the earth. In other words, they've gotten in bed with her. That's how we'd say it in modern terms, right?
Yeah.
The politicians, the political leaders of the world have gotten in bed with Mystery Babylon, who has an agenda to rule over everyone. And, it talks about the mark of the beast and says, and I don't know exactly what the 666 is other than I understand a little bit about number symbolism, but it says you can't buy or sell or trade or whatever if you don't have that mark. Well, tell me something. Can you open a bank account, get a job, get a mortgage, or do anything in our economy without your social security number?
Not a thing.
So you already have it. Doesn't matter whether someone puts it on a chip or whatever, you carry it around in your wallet.
And there's no way to get around it unless you live a very illegal life.
Exactly. And so, we need deliverance. Babylon is going to fall. And if we're dependent on that system, right, we're going to go down with it. We have to learn to trust in God, not in that system.
Yeah.
And that's what it means to flee Babylon. Babylon was the country that was the origin of our modern banking system.
Really?
Yes.
That I did not
know. Modern banking and economic system. So the money is the lifeblood of the beast.
Yeah, I see that. And, recently, and this is the part of the Billionaire Lifestyle, and I always say this, and I even put it on the website several times, and I say it in the podcast. It is literally not about money because we're already billionaires. If you just think about the composition of your body, you have well over 1 billion cells that comprise you. If you just think about your gut flora, that's populated already. So we're already billionaires. We've had 1 billion thoughts. We've had 1 billion emotions. We've been through so many things in our lives, so we're already billionaires. So stop thinking about money and think about living and finding out that truth. And as I said, I come from a generation of auto workers, which they got up in the morning or the afternoon, they went to that factory, they worked hard for 8 hours, they came home and they were kind of stressed out because they were in this unnatural environment. And it shows in their being as they age versus what I like about like my oldest daughter. She falls into the millennial category, and she's like, I'm not about all that. She's like, I need to be able to do what I need to be able to do, and I need to be able to live and experience life versus have things. And it took me a really long time to get past the ownership of objects. And I got to the point now to where I don't need anything. I have everything. I mean, I don't want anything. That's what I would rather say. I don't want anything because I have everything I need. I have a house. I have health. I have some people who love me, and I have, the good things. And I'm just trying to make it the best temple that I can from the perspective of what my ancestors have done and what we historically would do natively. And that's one of the reasons I want to talk to you.
Absolutely. One of the fastest ways to be happy is to look around at everything you have and start thanking God for it.
Yeah.
You have eyes, you can smell, you can taste, you can move, you got legs, you got arms, you got a place to live, you got food to eat, you got beautiful sunshine outside, you got flowers, you got butterflies. You can go on and on and on. So here's the thing. We are constructed as creators. Made in the image of our Creator, we are creators. And we create by our thoughts and our feelings. When we take a thought and we imbue it with emotion, we create our experience of life. And most people are creating a very unhappy experience of life because their thoughts are all on what they lack, and their feelings are all of pain and hurt and anger and frustration and everything, and they infuse those thoughts of lack with all of those negative emotions, and they sow that into the universe, and it comes back to them with an unhappy, miserable life.
Yeah.
When I had a thing where in a very short period of time, it looked like I was going to go bankrupt. It looked like I was going to lose everything. I had all these things just come down on me, and I was out in my garden mumbling at God like Job.
Oh.
And that little voice said, well, when you turned your life over to me, you said you'd give up anything for me. So if you had to give up anything, why are you complaining? And I go, okay, you win. You're right. Whatever. I trust you.
Yeah.
And I started to just take one day at a time and thank God for that day and just go. And you know what? I didn't go bankrupt. I didn't lose everything. Everything eventually turned around, but my attitude turned around first. And that was that I looked at, I said, well, right now I have a house. Right now, why am I going to worry? Why am I going to take thought for tomorrow? Right?
Right.
I'm going to focus on today. I'm going to do what God puts in front of me to do today. And I'm going to just trust that tomorrow God will take care of me again. And I've had that ever since. And even when things, in most people's eyes would be going like really bad.
Yeah.
I find reasons to smile. I find reasons to laugh. I find reasons to be happy. And I'm just basically a happy person.
Awesome. So you have some books out. You have websites out. Can we go through those, or at least a few of the books? Because I see you've got a lot of content.
Yeah, well, if you go to modernherbalmedicine.com, that's a website that I've got a lot of articles. And eventually we're going to be putting everything at stephenhorne.com, but we don't have that yet. I have a YouTube channel, Herbal Education. You can look me up with Stephen Horne, and I've got a lot of videos there. And we just had a book that's out on Amazon. It's called Modern Herbal Dispensatory, about making herbal medicines. And you can check out my other books at modernherbalmedicine.com or my personal website, stephenhorne.com.
Do you have them on Amazon? Because people are
Yeah, I do have. My Modern Herbal Dispensatory is on Amazon, and I think my a couple of my other books are on Amazon as well. So just look up me as an author, Stephen Horne.
Yep.
And you'll see some of my books.
And you have to look up the author, because I think there's an actor by the name of Stephen Horne as well.
Yeah.
Because some other guy came up, I was like, that's not the guy I was talking to.
Well, just look up my book, Modern Herbal Dispensatory, on Amazon, and that's when that book got published last November, end of November. And the first printing sold out in the first month. So it's been doing really well. So it's very easy to find on Amazon.
Actually, I'll put it on, because I do blog posts to accompany each interview. And I'll put the links up there for quite a few. As many books as you have, I'll put it up there.
Yeah, and my book on emotional healing is The Heart's Key to Health, Happiness, and Success.
So you said emotional healing. So what made you come across that? Was this from a time that you had to say, maybe I need to help myself?
Well, actually, the spirit drugged me into that. I had a healing experience some friends of mine led me through, which was had a profound impact on my life. I don't have time probably to tell you all about it, but I was telling somebody else about it, and she said, well, you have to do this for me. And I said, I don't know how. And she says, no, she says, you don't understand. I need help. You need to do this for me. And the little voice inside said, yes, you do. And I go, well, then what do I do? And so what I know about emotional healing was actually all taught to me. I mean, the initial thing was taught to me by spiritually. And then I also just started to acquire tools as I went along, things that were brought to me. But basically it's this. We've been taught our whole life to deny our feelings. And yet the heart is where we experience the spirit, not our head. And so by denying our heart, we shut ourselves off from the spiritual dimension. And we've been taught, we shouldn't be angry, we shouldn't be afraid, we shouldn't have all these feelings. But those feelings are telling us whether we're on track or off track. When negative emotions are telling us that our thoughts and behaviors are wrong. They're not leading in a constructive direction. So, and it's just like when you haven't fed your body, you get hungry. When you haven't drunk water, you get thirsty. When you haven't gotten sleep, you get tired. The anger, the fear, the negative emotions are saying you're not taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
You're not doing the things you need to do to properly take care of yourself. So if you deny your negative emotions, you deny your own needs. You deny your own spiritual needs. And you live in a world of denial. And I found over and over again when I led people to become emotionally honest with themselves and really not talking about thinking about the thing, but actually feeling it, feeling their anger, feeling their hurt, crying, letting themselves scream out, and then come after that and say, now look within for the light and the peace. They would be able to find the light and the peace inside.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because every time I've had one of those good cries, when you're crying, it's like, ah! But then afterwards, you're like, whew, want to go get a pizza?
You feel so much better.
You do,
because
feel better.
that's the way you discharge the tension and the frustration and come back to peace. So by teaching people to block their emotions, you're preventing them from going through the healing they need to go through, to recognize their own needs and go learn how to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
And it's disempowering to people. So what's happened is when you disempower people to trust in themselves, right? To trust in their own instincts, their own gut, their own inner knowing, then you more easily manipulate them from the outside.
Gotcha.
We've got the answers. Follow us. Do what we say, and we'll take care of you. We'll make sure that you're happy.
Well, that's pretty awesome. And I want to thank you so much for being on the Billionaire Lifestyle podcast. I want to thank you for your patience, for one.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome. It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed talking with you immensely. It's wonderful.
And the thing about it is we're already at the hour mark, because I know I could sit and literally talk to you. We could probably just...
I think we lost our connection. You still there?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Well,
Emmett is still there.
I'm here. What? Well, ladies and gentlemen, it looks like we lost our connection here, but we were right at the end as well. So, we've lost our connection, but that's the end of the Billionaire Lifestyle podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. That was Stephen Horne. You can find him at stephenhorne.com, and you can also listen to, you can also go to his other websites as well. I'll put it all in the show notes so that you can all see it. Thank you so much. And please go to iTunes, Stitcher, or emmettmuckles.com. That's EMMITTMUCKLES.com.